Chapter 9. A Life Transformed. Months passed, and David's life slowly transformed in ways he hadn't imagined possible. It wasn't just the subtle victories over the darkness that had changed him. It was the way he began to see the world differently. The weight of each day, once so oppressive, now seemed like a series of small battles that he could face with confidence. There was no grand miracle, no dramatic shift in circumstances, but there was something deeper at work. David wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. He was thriving. And though the shadows never truly disappeared, they were no longer the overwhelming force they once were. One evening, after a long day of work, he sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling beside him. The night was still, the kind of quiet that only comes in the early hours of the morning before the world starts moving again. His thoughts turned inward, as they often did now. He thought of all the times he'd come close to breaking, close to losing everything he'd worked for. His dignity, his strength, his very sense of self. But then he thought of the moment when the darkness had tried to swallow him whole. He remembered how he had spoken the words of authority, how, for the first time in his life, he had truly understood what they meant. "I have been given authority," David murmured to himself, the words filling the empty space around him. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't a boast. It was simply the truth he had come to embrace, the truth that had freed him. A sudden knock at the door snapped David from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone at this hour, and for a moment he hesitated. The thought of who might be on the other side, another problem, another weight to carry, distracted him. But then he rose, his legs no longer stiff with fear. He opened the door. There stood Pastor Elijah, a smile playing on his face. "I thought I'd find you here," the old man said, stepping inside as David stepped aside. "You're always welcome," David replied, though part of him wondered how the pastor had known to come. Pastor Elijah took a seat at the kitchen table, his eyes scanning the room, his gaze warm. "You've been doing well, haven't you?" David shrugged, but there was no hiding the sense of peace that lingered in his chest. "Better than I ever thought I could." Pastor Elijah nodded, a knowing look on his face. "It's not the absence of darkness that makes us strong, David. It's our ability to stand firm in the midst of it." David thought of those nights when the whispers in his head had threatened to take root, when he'd had to fight just to keep his mind clear. "I've learned that. It's not easy, but it's the only way forward." The pastor smiled again, a light in his eyes. "That's the victory we're called to, my friend. Not an easy life. No, that's never promised. But a life full of purpose, full of strength, despite the darkness that's always waiting for us." David's heart swelled with gratitude. "I think I finally understand what you meant. It's not about the end of the battle. It's about how we fight it, and the strength we find along the way." "That's right," Pastor Elijah said, his voice steady. "It's the journey that refines us. Every battle is an opportunity for you to become more than you were before. Every victory, no matter how small, is a step toward the man you were meant to be." David sat down across from the pastor, the truth sinking deep into his soul. The words felt like a key unlocking a door he hadn't realized had been closed all along. It wasn't just about defeating the darkness, it was about transforming into the person who could stand firm against it, who could stare down the shadows without flinching.